Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Goodrum Show with me, Chris Goodrum. As per usual, a big thank you to everybody that watched last week's episode of the show, everybody that commented, liked, all that kind of stuff. Certainly seemed to go down well with the It's All About Springbank Facebook group. Certainly didn't get any rude comments or emails. Yeah, so obviously I made a slight cock up with regards to the age of that private bottling, but I don't think it's going to be the last time I make a mistake, shall we say. But anyway, I don't think that had a great deal of bearing on the overall episode of the show. So yes, a big thank you to everybody that watched. If it brought in some new viewers, then brilliant. If you're, if this is the first time you've watched the show, then I hope you kind of stick around. And for those of you that have indeed stuck around for some time, yeah, nice to have you with me. As you can see from this week's episode, from the title page, it's a bit of a sort of a roundup of samples that have come my way of recent, well, since September of this year in actual fact. I mean, some of the bottlings are not particularly new. I mean, the Glencadam and the Tomintoul, I think, were actually released about this time last year. Excuse me, and but because of the COVID and all this kind of stuff, the samples, I've only just recently received the samples, like I said, in September, and the Tomatin ones, now the UK limited edition Fino sherry bottling, of course, is pretty new, and I've only just taken stock of it. I think the Decades II has been out for a little while. And as you can see, two samples from the Australian distillery Starward, which, as if by magic, appeared on my desk the other week. So yeah, big thank you to Scott at Cask Liquid Marketing for those samples, which weren't actually requested. They were just sent, which is unsolicited samples are kind of quite nice to receive every now and again, because you get a package and you go, ooh, wonder what's in there, anyway, so I wouldn't say I have history with the distillery, but I remember sort of the first time that I think they were launched in the UK in 2014, and the then distributors, and they do seem to have bounced around the distributors a little bit, it has to be said. Read into that what you will. Their first sort of bottling, or certainly the first bottling that I tasted and seemed to be available in the UK, was a bottling called the Ampera cask, which had all been which Ampera was a form of Australian sherry, and so it was young spirit, all whacked into these sherry casks, and it had no character whatsoever other than the sherry, and they were quite expensive bottlings, and I just thought, I'm not interested in that. As you well know, my opinions on the use of sherry casks, and well, I can tell you what, there's an awful lot of sherry casks knocking around here today, so this could be an interesting tasting. Anyway, so this was followed up by, I think, a bottling called the Wine Cask Edition, or New World Project Wine Cask, or something like that, which again was like really young spirit. I don't even think it was actually whiskey. It's under 3 years of age, whacked into first fill Barossa Shiraz casks, and again it was just like no spirit character, or a very young sort of Seiridh spirit character, and just all wine cask, and again weren't exactly cheap bottlings, and I just, it's, not particularly interesting. I mean, the thing is that sort of like when a customer comes in and I try and sell them a non-Scottish whiskey, it's always, the question is, what's so different about it? And you can explain the fact that obviously all distilleries are different, they have their own characteristics, etc, etc, and but you want the whiskey to tell you something about its where it comes from, its heritage, all that kind of sort of stuff. And when you just sort of whack the spirit into sort of sherry casks and that's all you get, it's like, well, where's the interest in that? I mean, I remember the sort of the first bottling of the Three Ships from South Africa. I mean, that was exactly the same. I was really intrigued by South African whiskey, never tasted it before, really wanted it to tell me something, and all I could taste was sherry, and I just thought, it was just such a disappointment. Anyway, so yeah, I've never really sort of warmed to Starward, to be bluntly honest with you, although they do seem to have won awards and people like their whiskey. So obviously I'm not going to dismiss them completely and utterly out of hand. It's always nice to sort of, you know, see new bottlings, and these two in actual fact are not particularly expensive, and in actual fact 4 of the 6 whiskies today I would class as affordable whiskies. So you know, again, of recent there seems to have been a lot of conversation, should we say, about pricing, and yes, it is a delicate subject, it has to be said. So like I said, 4 of these are actually well, less than £50 a bottle, so yeah, they could be interesting. And so yeah, I think that's enough of that. Let's just have a look at the lineup, shall we? Right, okay, so I'm going to kind of do 2, 2 and 2. It just seems like the easiest way of doing it when you've got so many different styles of whiskey. We're going to kick off with the 2 Starward bottlings. So this is the Two-Fold, bottled at 40%. Now it's a blended Australian whiskey, and the marketing sort of leaflety thing said both blended and single malt, which confused the hell out of me, because you can't be both. So I had to get sort of confirmation of exactly what it is, and it's a double mash bill. So they have a mash bill made from 100% barley, and I assume 100% wheat. I mean, there may well be a bit of barley thrown in to kick-start the fermentation, but so they have the 2 different mash bills, which are then blended together and matured again in Australian red wine. One assumes Barossa Valley Shiraz, but we'll obviously get there and figure that one out, I suppose, in due course. Second bottling is called the Nova. This is bottled at 41%, and this is their single malt matured in ex-red wine casks. Again, I'm assuming Barossa Shiraz, and it'll be interesting to see if this follows. I mean, I'm hoping that this is not pretty much the same as before, you know, less than 3-year-old spirit just whacked into wine casks and having no character whatsoever other than the wine cask. But yeah, we shall see. Right, the next two bottlings are the Angus Dundee bottlings. The first one we're looking at is called the, now this is a Gaelic word, so I'm going to murder it, the Seiridh, I don't know, Seiridh. I think, does the DH sound like a th? I don't know. Anyway, so it's a limited edition. It retails for $32.95. Oh, by the way, the Two-Fold is actually online. We haven't got stocks of it. $31.75, and the Nova is $44.75. So again, a lot better price point than the Ampera cask was. I mean, I don't know what that is now, to be honest with you. But anyway, coming back to the Tomintoul, this is $32.95. It's a limited edition, as is the Glencadam. Now, of course, limited edition means, well, very little really, because, you know, it's open to interpretation. You know, a limited edition can be a few hundred bottles, or it can be a few thousand bottles. But anyway, it's. And then I suppose the nice thing is that sort of, you know, they have created a limited edition, and instead of fancy packaging and all that kind of stuff, they've decided to just, you know, not quite entry level, but, you know, keeping the price down. It's an interesting bottling. It's bottled at 40%, and it's again to do with sort of Angus Dundee's relationship with Spain and their use of sherry casks. As you know, they do tend to use a fair amount of them, and this is, I believe, don't know, has no age statement, so I don't know how old the spirit is in bourbon. It was aged in bourbon and then finished in ex-Oloroso sherry casks. The next bottle we'll be looking at is the Glencadam Reserva Andalucía. Again, similar kind of principle. £37.95, so again, not an expensive bottle of whiskey. This is bottled at 46%, which is a bit better in my personal opinion, but we shall see. And this is a marriage of ex-bourbon and ex-sherry casks, and then finished in ex-Oloroso casks. So quite a bit of sherry going on there, and well, we shall see. And on to, like I said, the Tomatin UK, well, it's not single cask, it's just a UK exclusive. And this is a 13-year-old, and it's a vatting of 2 casks, 39350 and 51, which was distilled in November of 2006, and then moved into ex-Fino sherry butts in November of 2005. It's bottled at 46% and is a little bit more expensive. I've got it on, it's on our website at just over £79 a bottle, so it's a touch on the expensive side for a 13-year-old, it has to be said, but we shall see what the quality's like. And finally, now this one isn't expensive bottling, this is the Decades II. Now you may well remember the original bottling of Decades, which was done for the then distillery manager's, I think, retirement, or was just, you know, to sort of celebrate his period of being in charge at the distillery. And this is obviously a homage to that. Now it is £158, and I am a little disappointed by the packaging, it has to be said. Now I know at the end of the day, and I've said it endless of times, frippery packaging doesn't really matter at the end of the day, it's the quality of the juice in the bottle. But as consumers we do buy with our eyes, and the original bottling of Decades came in this lovely, fairly strong card box, which folded out, had all this lovely sort of information about all the casks that we used, and but this one too is just in a plain card box, just like all the rest of the range, and I think they missed something there, to be bluntly honest with you. You know, you're spending £158 on a bottle of whiskey, and well, you kind of expect a little bit more, but as I keep saying, it's, you don't just look at the box really, you actually drink the product. So as long as the product is damn good, that's really what we're concerned about. So this is obviously spans several decades of production at the distillery, and so what we have here is refill bourbon hoggies distilled in February 1973, July 1975 and September 1977 to represent the 70s. The 80s are represented by ex-bourbon casks, which were distilled in 1988, finished for 3 years in first fill Oloroso. The 90s are first fill bourbon barrels, which were distilled in October of 1995. The 2000s were recharred ex-Verdejo wine casks, which were distilled in January of 2000 and June of 2009, and the 2010s are represented by second fill French oak barrels distilled in March of 2013. So a lot going on there, a lot of different cask types, and yeah, it'll be interesting to see how Graham has kind of put them all together, because this is the skill of a blender, obviously taking all these component parts and putting them all together to create something hopefully rather special. So kind of looking forward to finishing on that one, as there's no peat. So anyway, I think that's enough waffling. I think it's time to taste some Starward. Right, okay, so let's kick off with the twofold. So like I said, wheat and barley mash finished in wine casks. See what those goes. Right, I'll tell you what, when I first smelt this, the first word that popped into my head was Mackmyra. And that is praise, I think you'll agree. It just has that Mackmyra-y kind of character. It's quite estery, it's juicy, fruity, it's tropical, there's apricot, pineapple, barley, there's a bit of wheatiness, although it's sort of a more kind of, oaty kind of wheatiness, I suppose. The casks are subtle, they're sitting in the background. I mean, the spirit isn't very old, but it's certainly old enough to have, you know, lost the sort of raw, cereally kind of character that the wine cask edition used to display. It's aromatic, it's beautifully put together, and it's £31.75. I mean, absolutely bargain, spot on. I love that nose. That is a lovely nose. It's balanced, and at the end of the day, that's what you want. I wanted to tell me something about the character of the distillery, the spirit, the casks, and you know what? I'm impressed. Let's see what Pat's like. If I can get my nose out of the glass, because that's a lovely nose. Opens up with a bit more of the red wine cask. I'm getting that sort of currant cherry kind of conserve character. There's a little bit of a sweetness there, almost a sort of a light syrup note. Barley comes in nicely on the mid palate. Maybe not quite so tropical as the nose would lead you to believe, but again, some lovely barley cereal character. But you know, again, has that sort of fruitiness. It's not cereally, and it's sort of like not, you know, overly young. Wine cask starts to come back on the finish. I'm getting sort of the red cherry, a little bit of tannin, a little bit of almost kind of chocolatiness, spice. It's got a creamy note as well. It's got a lovely softness, and although it's only bottled at 40%, it's enough. It's just giving it those spices just enough of a sort of like a little nip on the finish, just to go, do you know what? That is very, very nice. Okay, so, a surprise, let's move on to the Nova. So this is the single malt in wine casks. A little bit more winey, slightly more perfumed, but we're not talking sort of like, you know, tart handbag perfumed. Yeah, it's got an aromatic quality, touch of pepper, a little bit more tighter barley, less kind of tropical, which is obviously, I'm guessing, what the wheat mash has kind of added to the previous bottling. It's a little bit more herbal, it's a little bit more oak vanillan, touch more spice possibly, but it's herbally sort of spice, and again the nose is really well balanced. And what are we, 44 quid? You know, I'm not going to sort of complain about this whatsoever. This is probably, like I said, not quite so sort of, you know, tropically and fruity, but you know, again, balance is really good. Let's see what the pal's like. Again, probably a little bit more wine cask influence on the palate. It's got that little bit of tannin, slightly chocolatey tannin, slightly grippy. There's some spicy red fruits. It's very soft. I mean, obviously by keeping the alcohol content down, it's keeping the spice and the tannin level down. So it's got a lovely mouthfeel, a lovely softness to it. There is a touch of tropical fruit, some barley on the mid palate. Again, really nice and fruity. The wine cask returning in the finish with a little bit more spice, touch of red fruit, some cereal. I mean, again, that is just really pleasantly balanced, and you know, I am really shocked. And it just goes to show that, you know, you should never have preconceptions about a distillery, even though you may well have tasted a number of bottlings from them that maybe you like or maybe you dislike. You should always keep an open mind, because every now and again they chuck you in a curveball and you just suddenly go, ooh, ah, and I think that's pretty much what Starward have done this time. Okay, so let's move on to the Seiridh. So yeah, bourbon and sherry finish. Obvious sherry notes. There's a lot of sherry. It's macerated dark fruit, prune, raisin, a little bit of buttery almond, some toasty oak. Quite sweet. Pretty much all sherry. Very clean. Now, I mean, that is the one thing that I will say about Angus Dundee. I mean, they obviously pay a great deal of attention to the quality of the wood. And I don't remember coming across a stinky, sulphurous Tomintoul or Glencadam. And yeah, okay, so it's 32 quid. It's kind of, it's young, it doesn't really have a huge amount of character. It's pretty much all sherry. It is what it is, I suppose, at the end of the day. It's got some nice gingery notes on the nose. Let's see what it passes like. Soft, straightforward, pleasant, slightly herbal. Again, I'm getting that sort of gingery spiciness. Obviously, the dried fruit. It's got a relatively good length. It's okay. Now, I mean, the thing is with Tomintoul is that I really think it kind of only really starts to come into its own in its mid-teens. I mean, and you know, I've never really bothered with the, is it a 10, 12-year-old? I forget now. With anything other than the 16, because the price is just so damn good, and it's such a damn good whiskey. You know, it's like kind of like, well, why bother buying a 10-year-old for sort of 30-odd quid when for an extra, you know, 10, 15 pounds you can have the 16, and it's kind of like, oh my God, the value for money with the 16-year-old Tomintoul is just frightening. I mean, you know, I'm really surprised that they haven't put the price of that up significantly when you look at the price of you know, other distilleries, you know, mid-teens bottlings. Hopefully, no guys, don't put the price up, you know. But you know, it will go up, I imagine, in due course. So if you, anyway, what I'm saying is that sort of the 16 is just bloody good. This is okay. Okay, so let's move on to the Glencadam. Now, as you well know, I'm a huge fan of the Glencadam 10-year-old. I just love the estery tropical fruit character of it. It is, you know, it can be a bit of a fruit monster at times, it has to be said, but you know, I still think really good value for money. And anyway, we're talking about the Reserva. Now, a better balanced nose, I think, than the Tomintoul. It's got a slightly tauter sherry character, and there is some estery fruit notes, and that's obvious. I'm guessing that the vatting of American oak casks and sherry casks initially is a little bit more skewed towards the American oak, and maybe the finishing in Oloroso isn't quite so long, because it's quite fruity, it's creamy, it's again pleasant, it's nothing, it's relatively straightforward, but again it's £37.95. But you know, for a couple of quid more you can have the 10-year-old. That just kind of puts things into perspective, I guess. The oak is, with time, starts to become a little dominating, but the balance is, I'm still getting the fruit notes there. So like I say, overall I think the balance is a lot better than the Tomintoul. Let's see what the pal's like. Again, pleasantly balanced. Estery fruit, not incredibly complex. I would say the spirit is probably no older than about 7 or 8. Little bit of spice on the finish. Yeah, okay, it's I prefer that to the Tomintoul. I think probably the 46% ABV is certainly helping that intensity. Maybe it would have, I think with if the Tomintoul was bottled at 46%, it would probably just emphasise more of the sherry cask. But you know, it is what it is at the end of the day. It's a limited edition, which isn't very expensive. So, and if you like Glencadam, you're going to like this. It's not a bad bottling, but again, you know, it's. Right, okay, so let's move on to the Tomatin Fino sherry finish. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Straight off the bat, grapey Fino sherry. Very noticeable, very upfront, but very distinct. It's not your rich dark Oloroso or PX or what have you. It's really nice to see these casks being used, and you know, I'm surprised that they're not used so often. There's a touch of green nuts, some barley, a little bit of sultana, floral sultana, vanilla, almond paste, grape. Okay, but I like that. It's a nice nose. It's an interesting sherry nose. It is fairly heavy on the sherry, but I think the balance is pretty good actually. I like this. There's a slight farmyardy note just coming through now. It's got a really natural kind of feel to it. It's not totally polished, but it is classy. Yeah, so that's right. Richer, fuller. Again, kicks off with that sort of grapey, slightly winey Fino sherry character. Green nuts, minerals, almost salty minerality, which is really quite intense. I'm getting toffee, pecan nut, almond, sultana, soft spice, little citric on the finish, slightly oily, really nicely balanced, well balanced. Again, it is slightly more towards the sherry character, but I'm still getting a little bit of barley. I'm getting a little bit of distillery character, and it's just like I say, it's just nice to see sort of something other than Oloroso and PX. You know, it's like, you know, there are other types of sherry casks out there, guys. You know, and this goes to show that the Fino sherry casks can be really, really intriguing. So, I like that. Right, okay, so on to the decades. Right, there's a fair amount of sherry, some recharred ex-wine casks, but you know, there's some old bourbon in there as well. So you know, I'm looking forward to this. Ooh, noticeable maturity. It just has that lovely aged rancio. I'm getting mature, dusty, sawdusty American oak, a little bit of almost Armagnac-y sherry notes. No, probably more cognac-y, not quite so dark, actual fact. It's a slightly lighter, it's more, yeah, more cognac-y, more floral. Dried apple, beeswax, pear, touch of cinnamon, a little bit of sultana, light raisin. Oh, it's just a wonderful mature note to it. It's taking a time for me to get a little bit of that French oak, but there is a slight grippy French oak note, and there's a, I'm guessing that sort of slight floral note is the wine cask. It's got a slightly winey florally kind of note. Again, softly spiced. I mean, it's a beautiful nose. I mean, you could just carry on smelling that and just you know, it's layered, it's nuanced. You can just sort of pick out all those sort of slightly individual notes, you know, and you see. But overall, the 1970s malt is just, oh, it's just forming the bedrock. I mean, that is just shows you how good a blender that Graham is. I mean, that is just absolutely sublime. So we'll pass on. Oh, stunning, absolutely stunning. Kicks off with a little bit more sherry, but it's still plenty of that dusty, mature American oak. Again, it has that slight cognac-y kind of apple-y kind of character. There's some mature barley, a bit of spice, cinnamon, citrus peel, minerals. Wonderfully juicy and elegant. Really, again, like the nose, there was sort of so many layers to this particular malt, and again, the French oak just kind of pops through right at the end. You know, I'm getting that sort of slightly spicy French oak kind of note, a little bit of chocolate as well, coffee. The aftertaste is absolutely stunning. It really lingers. I mean, yes, it's expensive. Yes, it's £158, but oh, that's stunningly good. I mean, that really is a beautiful whiskey. And if you're going to blow the budget for Christmas, then you know, you can't go too far wrong with that particular bottling. That really is something very, very special. Like I said, I wish they'd have probably paid a little bit more attention to the packaging. Certainly, like I said, the original bottlings of Decades had a lovely packaging to it, and you know, I just think that they missed the boat a little bit on that one, and you know, and that I find quite unusual, because Tomatin just are really on top of their game when it comes to sort of like packaging and the whole kind of other bits, for want of a better word. Yeah, that's a technical term, the other bits. Yeah, they really do seem to sort of like have their head screwed on and you know, and innovative, and I've been doing this for quite some time, so I really am slightly disappointed with the packaging, but I am not disappointed with the juice that's in that bottle. The juice that's in that bottle is just absolutely sublime. Oh. Okay, so let's sum today's episode. So big thank you to all of the distilleries and or agents and what have you for the samples for today's episode of the show. Really appreciated. I hope you've enjoyed my review. I think obviously the biggest surprise was the Starward, both the Nova and the Twofold. Just very, very good whiskies, and I wasn't expecting them. Completely out of left field. You know, my original encounter with that particular distillery, like I said at the start, was young spirit, big wine, big sherry, really quite boring, to be bluntly honest with you. But these two bottlings are absolutely far from boring. They're really intriguing, and if they were doing this sort of thing right from the word go, well, I'd have been stocking it right from the word go. The Tomintoul, yeah, okay, so not particularly expensive, clean, pleasant, bit straightforward. It's okay, you know. If you like that kind of thing, you know, and you're on a budget, then that's fine. And to a certain extent, you could say exactly the same about the Glencadam. A little bit more interest going on in that particular bottling. Maybe the spirit's a little bit older. Maybe there's a little bit more American oak. It just seemed a little bit more intriguing. But again, when you sort of like say, well, that's $37.95, and for an extra couple of quid I can have the gorgeous 10-year-old. Well, to me it's a bit of a no-brainer really. The Tomatin Fino, again, lovely bottling. Nice to see sort of like Tomatin being innovative, which is just their thing, and using, you know, something other than Oloroso casks. Yes, it is a bit heavy on the Fino, but you know, I think that's a lovely whiskey. And the Decades, like I said, you know, packaging issues aside, the juice in that bottle is just absolutely sublime. And like I said, you know, if you're going to treat yourself for Christmas, you can't go too far wrong with that, because you will love that. And I think that's absolutely stunning. So there you go, that's this week's episode of the show in the bag. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you'll come back next week and find out what intriguing things I'll be toasting next week. So until then, stay safe. I hope the lockdown is not going to be too arduous this time around, and good afternoon and good ramming.